we take our seats, please? Mr. Mayor, I think we'll start if that's okay. We'll let a couple of councillors take their seats when they bring. You've mentioned a number of times about delivery and the concerns that you've got about all this. I thought we might move to governance first, because I think I can understand your concerns, and a number of councillors have spoken to me about it. If I could take a broad question to start with, then we'll get on to the three questions on detail. You mentioned that our chief executive is going to do another job as well as the current job, which I don't know any chief executive that can do that in the private sector. Most chief executives work 60 or 70 hours a week to deliver in the private sector. So that is a concern, but we've also got a large number of interims in place. And your ambition, which I think most people share around the table of trying to actually move those core goals forward, is totally dependent on the ability of the officers to deliver. And not only do we have problems with that at government level, but we've also had some challenges at combined authority level. What are you going to do to actually ensure that that team is capable of delivering to the standards that you expect?
Thank you, and that's a really sort of relevant and opposite question. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm a new mayor with a different set of priorities, and I'm going about the business of mayor in a very, very different way to my predecessor. And I think if you ask the officers here about how different it was, well, I certainly did after week 3 or 4. And when the exec team came in to meet me, and I said, thank you for your support. And I used those meetings to give them feedback on my equivalent, the red box, and some of the issues that I was facing. And I turned the tables. I said in that meeting, how different is it for you? Because it is about that relationship working really well. And they said it was a 180-degree cultural shift for them. And that's because my approach is about collaboration. I was really clear when I got elected, and I spoke to staff in this office, it might have even been in this meeting room, that as a newly elected mayor, the difference I could make to this region working independently of key stakeholders was negligible, and it's the same for the staff here. So I emphasise the importance of collaboration, and I was really clear that to make the difference in this place, we need to work with other partners and stakeholders really a lot more effectively. And I'm really clear about my objectives, and I can't expect businesses in this region, FE colleges or universities or our third sector or even our councils to have objectives totally aligned with mine. But I'm in no doubt, and nor is anyone else, the more aligned we are, the bigger the difference we can make. So I say that at the outset because it's about more than this organisation delivering. It's about all of us, and it's finding a new approach. I approved the position that my chief executive has taken up, simply because I think it's good for her. I think it's good for the region. I think it's good for this place. And if we get requested that a key senior member of our staff is valued so highly by a Secretary of State that they'd like her to be involved as the chair, by the way, a chair of, not a chief executive, a chair of a shadow board of a new government organisation, I think it's something we should acknowledge and support, and that's what I've done. And I've done it because I know that the expertise we have around this place, the combined authority and across the region, can be utilised to ensure that my delivery plans remain intact. And I would not have approved for Laura to take up that role if I didn't think it was good for her and or that we couldn't deliver using more collectively the resources and expertise around the table. So really, really clear about that. In addition, and I'll keep this bit of the answer short because I know there's some others on governance, but The bit about working differently is working very different with leaders and their chief execs, and indeed with the team here at the Combined Authority. And I've just given an example of that cultural shift and mindset in this place to work very, very differently. And there is, subject to further discussions with leaders, which will be taking place later this week, going to be a considerable overhaul and review about the way in which this organisation works and the way it works with other key stakeholders. So it's not just about one person, it is about a plan for delivery, and that plan for delivery is not just organisation-wide, this organisation-wide, it's also about how what we do here is integrated with and aligned to and supports the work doing but by and with all of our key stakeholders, and local authorities a primary role in that. And that's why decisions we make about how we deliver in the future will be made not just by me, but with local authority leaders and with our businesses and with our colleges and with our universities. And that plan is in process, and that plan will underpin our regional growth plan, which we need to submit for the Chancellor Exchequer. So our priorities here will be aligned to what we need to deliver for local government, and we will ensure, national government, and we will ensure, and I will ensure, that this organisation is partnering the best way with other stakeholders, and everyone is as much aligned as possible to deliver not just on my ambitions, but the ambitions of everyone in this room.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Fenton, if you could ask your question 31, which is again on the same thing, but about democratic within that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in and around the governance changes that have been introduced. Can you explain those governance changes? And can you let us know if there's any risk that might result in a perceived reduction of political engagement and oversight?
Thank you, Councillor Fenton. So it's a really important point, and I hope my answer gives you the reassurance you need. So I inherited a position where council leaders were given portfolios. These were policy areas of which they had some responsibility. In practice, my discussions with those leaders found that in almost every instance, that role was not properly supported. They had no influence or impact on policy, and they questioned individually and collectively the time they spent on those roles because of the impact or lack of impact or importance that they had. In addition, many of those leaders, if they had an interest in that particular area of policy, it didn't go beyond the boundaries of the place they represented. In some areas, leaders didn't have a great interest at all. But also, I think at least two of the leaders had full-time jobs outside politics, and many of them, if not all of them, were spending quite rightly a lot more time running their own councils because of the acute financial problems the previous government had left them with. So, as a result of that, it was not just my view, but it was a collective view around the table that leaders needed to be better engaged with the Combined Authority, less burdened, and be wasting less time. My focus is on political engagement and delivery. So we sat down, I think it was the end of week one when I was after I'd been elected, with the leaders to say, how do we shape a governance system that works best for everyone, encourages council leaders to be more engaged, but more engaged on the most substantive issues affecting this region, and not parcelled off or have roles that are atomised and have little or no impact. So we developed a system now where portfolios have gone, and I meet with leaders at least once a month and sometimes twice a month to discuss the most substantive issues affecting this region in a very open discussion. And the feedback I've had from leaders, irrespective of party, of a political party, is for the first time ever, we've opened up discussions about the CA in this region the way they've never been opened up before. And we have very open, private discussions around the most important issues. And I'm really pleased with the progress we're making. Firstly, those leaders are starting to get to know each other for the first time. And they tell me for the first time, since the creation of the Combined Authority, they feel like they're engaged in working as a team. That's really, really important, because we have to work as a team if we're going to do the best for this region. For the first time, they tell me they're also discussing in a more open way the most important issues facing the region. And that's really important, because Interestingly, every single leader has made addressing youth unemployment one of their biggest priorities. That is absolutely the right thing for us to do, is to have alignment on those key issues. And as we go forward and we shape our regional economic or regional growth plan, something we need to submit to the government, the Chancellor Exchequer. We are also discussing in a very open way the key ingredients and priorities in that plan. That would have not happened before under a portfolio system. It's happening now, and I'm very, very pleased. But the most important aspect of that, for the first time for 8 years, leaders in this region feel firmly and totally engaged with the issues facing this region and the issues that political leadership needs to resolve. And we'll continue to work in that way for as long as leaders find it an effective way of collaborating and working together. And it's the same reason why I've demanded that we shorten and reduce the content and number of pages in board reports. Frankly, the previous versions that ran for 300 or 400 pages meant that in most cases, leaders hadn't even turned a page of one of those reports. And why would you, when it might take 5 or 6 hours to read those documents in advance of a board meeting? So we made the whole process of paper supporting boards slimmer, focused on key actions and decisions, because this new approach is about engaging leaders in a way they've not been engaged before, so we can all take leadership responsibility for how this region works and its future.
Are you comfortable with me moving on to Nigel Lumbey, or have you a supplementary?
If I may, please, just a brief supplementary in terms of just nailing down that governance. So the question I've got that follows on from that, and thank you for the explanation, and what you've said does actually sound great, and if it's working better, brilliant. Does this new way of working, is it already within the constitution of the combined authority, or are there plans to change the constitution of the combined authority? Sorry, I'm not very familiar with the constitution of the combined authority. It's rather a large document.
Nor am I. I'll get advice on the constitution. So now this, the constitution of the combined authority, which largely involves the way in which decisions are made and approved, remains fundamentally unchanged. So this is really a decision around how we work as a group of leaders. I didn't know whether Helen wanted to say anything at this point on constitutional matters.
I think Dan and I were just discussing very much around the edges of decision making. There might be a poor decision making things, so I might see.
Thank you.
Councillor Nicholas, your point was directly related to this, was it?
I believe so. I'm requesting that my question follows on, because it's a natural flow. Would you give me permission to ask my question before Councillor Lumbey?
I'm comfortable with that, yes.
Mr. Mayor, you've set out priorities. Your priorities: jobs, homes, growth, travel. You set up council of experts that so each of the 4 areas have a dedicated task force of people from across sectors who are experts in their fields and have a proven track record of doing things. Bearing in mind the responses you have given to the questions that have been raised in this section, and they're very interesting, and I support them entirely because your analysis is correct. How can a leader look at huge volumes of paper, be expected to absorb and respond? So there needed to be a way of dealing with that. But again, using your word, you have experts in this room. And so how can overview and scrutiny help deliver better outcomes? Again, using the experience of this room.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McNicholas. And I'll be really clear about I think we all need to understand the importance of scrutiny and transparency. And I welcome conversations like this. And it is not just about you asking questions and getting some clarity or confirmation on some of the things that I'm doing, I want to, I'm open to a discussion with you individually, collectively, about how we get scrutiny to work more effectively. And if it works more effectively, it drives improvements in delivery, in policy and outcomes. And that's really, really important. And that's what we're here to do. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. The bit for me that I think may well be helpful is finding a way, whether it's, and this might be a constitutional matter, beyond my technical expertise, but there is just something about whether or not there can be more input from people like yourselves before policy is put in place. Yeah, so something a bit more proactive, a review stage, some scrutiny at that point. I'd be welcome and very open for conversation around the way in which scrutiny may work more effectively or its role broadened. The more effective you are, the more comfort I have, not just that I'm being scrutinised, but what we're doing is the right and the best thing to do.
I'm going to move on to Nigel Lumby for his question, because task forces came up in the previous one, and then I understand that Councillor Clements online has got a question.
Thank you, Chair. There, your priorities document talked about your task force and setting them up, and some of the words have just been sucked out of me by the last councillor in respect to driven by specialist input, council of experts, people from across sectors. These sound like additional people, because if all you're doing is shuffling the members, the expertise you've got within the CA, limits. So do you expect that your proposed task forces will require any additional resources, including staffing, to assist them to undertake their work?
Thank you, Councillor Lumby. I was pretty clear from the outset about my focus on delivery and my dislike of bureaucracy and meetings that have little effect or impact, which frankly do only one thing, and that is occupy people's time unnecessarily. So it's really, really clear about the task forces. They'll be supported by CA officers who will undertake most of the work behind them, and exec directors in the combined authority will act as a senior responsible officers for ensuring the work of the task forces is embedded in the governance system and reporting lines are clear. So there's no expectation that councillors, elected councillors, will undertake additional work beyond the two, one from each party, that will sit on each task force. The point of the task force is to recognise the fact that if we're going to do things differently and shape the region in the way I want it to be shaped, we need expertise from beyond the boundaries of local government or local government, or even this place, to have an impact. And that includes academics, it includes business leaders, it includes industry experts, it includes sector experts. But more importantly, I want these task forces to represent every part of this region. So I want people, leaders, experts, academics or business people from across this region to be represented and inputting to those task forces. One thing that struck me during my campaign and the period of time shortly after I was elected is that groups were put together before informally based on personal friendships, alliances, or other relationships or networks that had little or no beneficial impact to the key decisions we want to make in this region. I was overwhelmed with requests from business leaders, from academics, from others across the region, that entrepreneurs, leaders of SMEs that wanted to play a role in shaping the future of this place. We've got a duty to engage. I believe task forces are the best way to do it around my agendas, and we will ensure we both attract and recruit the very best, and that they play their role in the very best way. But to be clear, the additional burden for people in this room or elected members will be minimal, apart from those, one of each party, that will be asked to sit on each of the task forces.
Councillor Clements, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just picking up a point that Richard just made there about pre-decision scrutiny. To me, that's absolutely vital, and that brings me on to a question that I wanted to ask about how the review of governance is going to look at the role of the Transport Delivery Overview and Scrutiny Committee, because I think we all know it's an evolving body. You know, it's a merger of a previous scrutiny committee and the Transport Delivery Committee, which had survived from the Passenger Transport Authority. And I just feel that at the moment, we're not really exercising effective scrutiny because we're not being involved in advance of decisions or when there's any possibility to influence them. And I'm not going to make any friends here, and I apologise for being blunt, but what is the purpose of the member engagement groups? Because they seem to be a lot of extra meetings where it's just presentations being put forward, but really not that much influence. Opportunity to influence. It's just a one-way flow of information, which is, I'm always grateful. We have brilliant officers, great experts in their fields, but I don't really sense that that we have much scope to influence policy. And I know that it's a lot of extra meetings for the officers. So can I please ask that that's looked at? And can you think about actually drawing on the expertise of the people around the table at a point where we can still actually have some influence on the development of policy? Thank you.
I'll be very brief, Liz. I might come back to Helen on constitutional arrangements, but I'm not, I'm very happy and I want to see more scrutiny. I don't want to waste anyone's time, let alone members, responding to a one-way communication that's dominated by information that you either don't have access to or is overwhelming. But in terms of the constitutional effectiveness of scrutiny or otherwise, I do think it's up for members and people in this room to discuss and shape future scrutiny arrangements rather than the mayor. I am receptive to new approaches. I want scrutiny to be as effective as possible. I want it to be as open, as transparent as possible. And at the same time, I don't want to burden members with volumes of work that distract them from the real focus and their attention. So I would welcome an ongoing dialogue and representation from this group and from your chair and vice chair as to the way in which we can improve the effectiveness of scrutiny across the whole of the CA.
Just bring in the chairman of transport scrutiny.
Thank you. Yeah, just to reassure Councillor Cummins that a refresh of NEGS is an item agenda at our next TDOS meeting, and I'm sure Councillor Clement will be commenting as to how it could be improved.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Thank you. I was about to say, shall we move on? Councillor Clinton, you've got another governance issue, yes?
Sorry, Chair, but I'd just like to circle back round to any risks that might be relevant, given the lack of political engagement and oversight on the task forces. Not to be a downer in the room, but as we've seen with our transport systems, when things are shaped for profit with other instances maybe not as important on the table, we end up with rather a problem that we then have to solve. So it's just linking back around to my original question of ensuring that there is that political oversight and political engagement to ensure that everyday interests and not just business interests are taken into account at these task forces. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fenton, yeah, the chairs of the task forces will be led by a politician. The chairs will be political. That's my understanding. Maybe wrong. But I think that's the current view. The importance of the task forces are to ensure that when we go in to make decisions, that we are as best informed as possible, and these and it is important that we have representatives from our business community as well as our third sector, academics, and indeed representatives from our colleges too, because when we're shaping the system of the future, it's very important that we're getting the best possible advice and as many perspectives as possible. But to be clear, the purpose of the task force is to inform policy and provide insight and expertise, not to make policy, which is really, really important. But the other issue is underneath everything we're doing, or sitting above everything we're doing, is the need to drive economic growth and prosperity. And it would be remiss of me or anyone else in this room as elected member to believe that we have total jurisdiction over and the expertise necessary to determine and frame that. And I'll come back to a very good example around growth objectives and what we need to do to attract investment into our investment zones. Any proposition, any discussion about the true benefits of those needs to be informed by expertise we've got across our economy, and particularly the investment community. Certainly, once we've progressed, there are going to be some recruitment going on for task forces, and once we've made some further progress, we can make sure that this scrutiny board is informed of the roles and the scope of that work and who's sitting on them. And indeed, at a future date, hopefully you'll be able to get access to some of those people, those board members too.
I'd like to now move on to homes and housing, if we could. I'd like to reorganise the numbers so we get a bit of focus. But if Councillor Bainton starts us off with question 16, I'll then move on to questions 19 and 20, which are Councillor Waters, and then Councillor Huxley on question 21, because they're all in the same area. So I'm happy if you could start us off, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So my question is around your ambition versus delivery. And the previous mayor did acknowledge that we weren't able, the WMCA were not able to deliver or hadn't delivered as fast as he would have liked them to have done over the years. So in your manifesto, one of your pledges is to build 20,000 extra homes by 2031. That would mean building in excess of 2,800 homes a year. How are you going to ensure the delivery of that rather ambitious target?
Thank you, Kathy. So I was really clear from the outset that we need to be more ambitious in terms of delivering homes. And I'm very pleased that the government has also recognised the importance of house building and has set new plans and targets for this region, for the country, which is all part of delivering economic growth and prosperity. In terms of the role in this region, I'm really clear that look, we're not a planning authority. We need streamlined planning, and I'll be working with our councils across the region to what we can do to speed up delivery, attract investment, and deliver the homes that the people need. And indeed, without naming lots of those projects, I'm already working behind the scenes on a number of very large projects in this region to help to look at ways in which, just by having conversations, to be frank, and bringing people together and convening, we can ensure that projects that have reached a hiatus or may have been going backwards are going forward. So there is something about not just the power of money, but using the mayoral role, convening to drive projects forward. And we're doing that, if not every day of the week, but several times during a week. It then comes to the issue of what I faced here and what I inherited. And frankly, I inherited a situation regarding how the housing resources of this organisation is used to be at best dysfunctional and at worst totally inadequate. And we need to simplify the processes, we need to simplify the way we make decisions, and we need to have some regional priorities in a way that we haven't to date. So I inherited a situation where there was no strategic alignment of housing resources in this region to our regional priorities. Requests from developers and house builders were dealt with in an ad hoc, incremental way. Commitments were made that were open-ended. And indeed, in some cases, commitments need and funding allocated when those projects never even went ahead. And that is concerning me to a very significant extent. So I've asked for a fundamental review about how we prioritise projects in this region. And if we do that, we can start to align priorities with the resources we've got. And as a consequence of that, you'll see emerging very soon a new set of priorities that align to my commitments, both housing delivery and what I want to do on affordable and social housing. So that led me then to going to the, writing to the Secretary of State for, in the first instance, more freedom around around 125 million pounds worth of funding that is stranded here that I'd like to use for social and affordable housing. So that's a key first step beyond the strategic approach I mentioned. And the second big step is working from the next spending round from 2027 onwards with Homes England nationally about working with them in a far more strategic and integrated way. So their priorities in this region are aligned to ours. And that work will ensure that the investment we're seeking and securing from Homes England in this region is targeted towards our priority projects and the places we identify as a priority. So Kathy, in short, we're going to overhaul the way in which we make decisions and choices around the way we use our resources. And then we're going to use those resources working with our key stakeholders, local authorities and with Homes England. And if we do that, I think we can make the progress on housing outcomes that we need, and we'll see a step change in delivery based on what we've seen before. But to heart of all of this is actually simplifying processes and making the way we deploy resources far more straightforward and less convoluted.
Very quick supplementary on, well, it's not really a supplementary, more of a plea. So I absolutely welcome the simplifying of processes and the simplifying of applications and a more transparent arrangement and conversation with developers. And it's actually making those figures of delivery much more transparent so that they are understandable and clearly accessible for the public as a whole.
So what I would like to see, Kathy, is for the major projects that we support, we will have a published list of those projects and we'll understand the commitments we've made to them and the affordable homes that they were securing. And when we secure those affordable homes, I want to ensure that those homes remain affordable in perpetuity. And I don't think, based on what I understand, that, well, it might be the case, but there's no governance arrangements in place to ensure that those funds that are being used to support affordable homes, those homes remain in that affordable tenure or in perpetuity. So things we need to do to improve the systems here and decision-making processes. And if we do that, we'll make sure that every pound spent on supporting housing projects is being spent on the right way for the purposes we intended, and the outcomes are clear and transparent to everyone.
Thank you.
I think we all appreciate that. We've had a task and finish group going and we struggled to get the numbers ourselves. So we understand your predicament.
Thank you.
If I could ask Councillor Waters to do, I think there are two linked questions, 19 and 20.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Hi, Richard. The new housing bill for what in this new housing bill, the WMCA works at 20% of affordable housing. Now there's actually a government policy that states it's got to be 50%. Will the combined authority be able to implement and actually ensure that the West Midlands actually gets to this target on brownfield sites? I know they've got to build on greenbelt, so it'll also be on greenbelt. I've read a thing this morning where Barratt are actually stating they won't be able to achieve the 50%. Is there anything we can do to actually ensure that this is implemented? Thank you.
There is. I think you need to start volunteering to build houses. No, more seriously, the government have set this ambition, this target, particularly for grey belt, as you said, and green belt. We have a bit of grey belt in this region, but the biggest challenges we face in this region is developing brownfield sites, and parts of this region have felt two legacies from deindustrialisation. Firstly, the loss of jobs and business, and then we're left with the legacy of land that is contaminated, not fit for development. So our priority will remain supporting projects to be developed on brownfield land. And my understanding is the current requirements will hold on that. But I also want to do something else. I want to talk about simplifying the way we support projects. Currently, it's often the case that developers seek, when they secure planning permission from councils, the council's requirements, and councils are the planning authorities, the developers' requirements for affordable housing on those sites is often different to the requirement the combined authority has. And I don't think that makes sense. I think it's holding up development and confusing things. So I want to get as much alignment with planning and housing approval processes in this place as there are with councils. And I think that alignment will give councils the clarity that they need, but also developers and investors the clarity they need too. So I'm looking for as much alignment around the way we support affordable housing from this place as in a way that works with councils. If we can do that, I think we've got a better chance of delivering homes more quickly, which is also and ensuring that we're investing in supporting social and affordable homes in the right places.
Alden, you had one directly on affordable housing.
We're just on policy and housing policy and planning, if I can. Thank you. Just very quickly. So the uncontrolled spread of exempt accommodation across the region is destroying communities. While you're lobbying the government around housing policy, can I just please make a plea that you also lobby to bring exempt accommodation into the planning system so that there can finally be proper control of the spread that's happening across the region? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Alden, and we'll continue to do that. And I understand, look, I've seen it and I've listened to people and I've witnessed the impact that type of housing is having on our neighbourhoods and our communities across this city and the West Midlands.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Waters, if you can move to your second question, which is question 20.
Thank you, Chair. I think you've already actually answered this in a way. What are your commitments regarding delivery of social housing? How do you consider this can be actually be implemented and actually achieved and actually give a target that actually is achievable?
I've been really, really clear from the outset, or even before the outset, that we have a real issue in this region. We've got 64,000 families on housing waiting lists and 20,000 families in high cost, poor quality, insecure temporary accommodation. It's blighting people's lives and the futures of their families and doing untold damage to them. I remember I visited an inner city school in Handsworth, and the morning I was there, 2 pupils in that school and their mother were evicted overnight by a rogue landlord. And if it hadn't been for teachers contributing so they could stay in a hotel, that family would be living on the streets that week. That is an event that's happening too regularly, if not every week across this region. And I made a commitment that until we can remove all those families from temporary accommodation, my pursuit and ambition to build social housing remain undiminished. And that has to happen, and that's my commitment. And that's why that figure that I've mentioned was around 20,000, was around where we need to aim for social housing, and we used to redirect our resources for that purpose. Now, which is why, and I'll come back to it, as soon as we had a new government elected, I wrote to the Secretary of State asking more freedom to use those resources in the way that I wanted to. I'm hoping we'll have more freedom to use those in the way that I want. In the short term, and if this demonstrates my focus on delivery, I spoke to some housing association leaders in this region who've got development plans and simply said to them, if you've got these development plans going for 15 to 18 months ahead, how many of those units, if I gave you some additional grant, could you convert to social housing? Because almost overnight, in 15 months, we could develop 2,000 to 3,000 units, and we can take 2,000 to 3,000 families out of them. And that's now not lazy, but it just tells you how much for me delivery is important. What are the quickest routes to delivering this stuff, demonstrating value for money? Now, it might not be that I get all the freedoms I want, and it might not be that we use every pound we have to use freely in that way, but it was really a statement of intent. It has to be about delivery and focus. So there are some short-term issues about how we use resources. Going forward, we repeat in some ways what I said before. We need a strategy, a housing strategy for this region that identifies key projects and opportunities for development, and where we can best use the combined authorities' resources aligned to those of Homes England to deliver the affordable and social housing we need. But rather than approach that in an ad hoc, incremental, opportunistic way, working with private sector developers, we'll do it across the region in a planned, in a structured way, in a strategic way that ensures we're building the housing where it's needed for the people that need it most.
Thank you, councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. In our country, there are roughly 11 million renters. And Section 21 traumatized those renters, and every time they are evicted, is the taxpayer picks up the bill, which is so unfair to our taxpayers and also to our residents and families. So my question is, the government has brought the legislation in. Do you welcome that? Also on social housing and affordable housing, thank you very much what you said, but you need to go further, because the original sin was committed by late Mrs. Thatcher when she sold the family silver, when she introduced RTB, right to buy, and never replaced those houses which was sold. That's why we are in such a mess, and a housing market is broken, and now the government has promised 1.5 million houses. So my plea to you is, please be forthright and straight with the government and those politicians at the central level that our communities are suffering. Give us the tools, give us the funding so we can build social housing. That is the only way forward. This nonsense about affordable housing, what you can afford, I can't afford. So this is nonsense as far as affordable housing is concerned. What we need is social housing. This is how we're going to have people, our residents, all we want and they want is safe, secure, affordable housing. And our forefathers done it in our country. After the Second World War, the Labour Party and Mr. Macmillan, they were the heroes, and they build houses for our heroes. So that is your task. Please, I ask you, take it on. You have our support.
Thank you. I'll do my very best.
I think we'll go to question 17, Kathy, if we could. Follow on from that, I think.
Okay, so again, in your manifesto, Mayor, you talk about a landlord register. We all support the crackdown on road landlords because you're quite right, it blights the communities that we all live in, and it destroys lives and damages lives of families and people who live in accommodation, poor quality accommodation. My question really is around, is it actually within the gift of the mayor, or is it should be the role of the local authority? And if you're going to do it in collaboration, how is that going to look? And what does a landlord register actually mean for landlords?
Thank you, Kathy. It's a really important point because we could comment on the disruption that road landlords and others play in our communities and the impact it has, but we've got an issue to fix. So I made this commitment through my manifesto, which was twofold, really. Firstly, demonstrate I recognise the issue, but also we want to do something about it. But I also recognise that it's not something we can do alone from this place. And I'll come back to my issue about working collaboratively with councils and their environmental health teams on enforcement. But I think the big issue, what we need to give us all the power over us to be empowered to make the difference, is working with the government on future legislation. And we are currently in discussion from this place with MHCLG on some of its learnings from its Pathfinder programmes, and we are looking and expect there to be new duties and powers under the Renters' Rights Bill for local authorities, which is important. and we'll continue to lobby, and I will lobby as we currently are doing, as that bill passes Parliament, to ensure that key stakeholders here have the powers they need to enact. What I want to make sure is that what we're doing here, I'll be really clear from the outset, I don't want this place or anyone in this place or myself treading on the toes or getting in the way of local authorities. I want to ensure that with the resources we've got at our disposal, we're using to best effect. And I think in this case, it makes sense because of the proximity of councils to their communities, to councils to be the ultimate enforcers. I want to ensure that the role we're playing across the West Midlands, whether it's supporting with resources or sharing intelligence and knowledge, is dealt with as widely as possible. There's something else we need to do, and it comes up every time we look at doing things differently, is the way in which we the use of data can be shared more widely, and we're not contributing any rules around data protection that can sometimes impede the progress we're making. So to be really, really clear, it is a priority for me. We've talked about its importance. What we all need to do in this region is work together to find and work out and lobby for the best route of doing this on the ground here. And if we do that, we can make the big difference. I've just had a briefing sent to me around from the early success from the investigations and work from Pathfinder programs in this region is demonstrated, it won't surprise you, incredibly high levels of non-decency in rented properties, privately rented properties, and more sadly, if you like, that tenants had little knowledge or no knowledge of their rights in those circumstances. So it's the most vulnerable people in our communities that are paying the highest price and being accommodated in the worst accommodation. That is something we need to work together to address.
Thank you. If we could move on to Councillor Waters' question on brownfield, question 23.
Sorry, I'm not on the wrong side, you should be finding. The brownfield first approach, the previous mayor had a policy on brownfield first approaching development. Is this your view as well? Would you prefer to use brownfield and green belt? Because in Walsall, we have a great deal of green belt, and the amount of homes that we've actually was asked to actually build means that we possibly could have having to build on green belt.
So thank you, Councillor Waters. So in terms of the way I use the resources here, two things. Firstly, brownfield remains a priority for me as mayor, as it did for my predecessor. And that makes absolute sense because we've got an enormous amount of brownfield land that needs to be brought into development and brought into development to support delivery of homes, and it'll help us create jobs and it'll help us house those families that are a priority for me, particularly those in social on waiting lists who should be getting access to social and affordable housing. So that remains my priority. The government have made housing a priority and wants 1.5 million homes built during the life of this parliament, and it will be having a separate dialogue to me with councils about what obligations are. But to be very clear from this place and from my desk, my priority is delivering on brownfield sites, and it is one of the best ways to house families, to deliver affordable housing, and also bring development and prosperity back to our towns and cities across the region.
Thank you. Yes. Could I ask a quick supplementary to that? Are you lobbying the government to give local authorities easier compulsory purchase powers on brownfield sites that have not been, let's say they've been disused for a large number of years?
That's a good thing.
I haven't been as sort of a discrete request, but we are in constant dialogue around in which we can streamline planning process and development processes across the region.
I think quite a few councillors have mentioned that in the past, so it's one of those things that I think, irrespective of political persuasion, most people don't like ransom strips or being held to ransom.
No, and also I'm also aware that there are sites out there that have been, held for a long time and that with little intent to develop, and they they are sort of, they become black spots, if you like, on some of our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Hemingway, since I don't have a nameplate. Regarding the brownfield and all of the efforts to build on that first, have you made any progress with the national government, given the industrial heritage in the West Midlands, about some funding for cleanup of our brownfield areas? Because particularly in the Black Country, we have lots of land that we would love to build upon, but it is so polluted that the costs are beyond us. Is there anything forthcoming in that area?
So a very good, a very good question. So we have had and use resources here at the Combined Authority to support major decontamination works on major sites across the region. And as we go into future spending rounds, I'll be requesting more of that. Because I know that in order to bring some of the sites, and I've visited many across, Sandwell, Dudley, Walsall and Wolverhampton, particularly in the Black Country over recent weeks, around the development of those sites. And we have two challenges actually. One is to decontaminate them, and the second one then is how do we then help investors and councils repurpose those sites for other uses, particularly employment land and housing. But at this stage, I'm just going to have one of my exec directors next to me, Ed, just to give you some more detail, perhaps on plans around brownfield going forward.
I think you've answered the question very well, to be quite honest, Mayor. We have done and we will continue to use government funding in order to try and decontaminate sites with a view to building houses upon them. It's as simple as that. The flexibilities that we are seeking from government in relation to some of those funds that we've had historically and the ones that we want in the future would actually make that easier for us to be able to do that, because sometimes there are strings attached that mean that we can't use it as extensively as we might.
But just one thing, Councillor, I think is important is that where councils have got priority sites for development that are contaminated, or there are other conditions around them that mean that a form of government intervention is needed, it would be fantastically helpful to have an early sight of those so we can build them into future programmes, as opposed to waiting to the moment where the deal's got to be done, and then it's very hard at short notice to align the resources and the funding. Particularly if it's been committed elsewhere.
It's a useful point for councillors to take back. Councillor Akhtar, did you still have a question?
Yeah. Chair, Mayor, that is fine, but when public money is involved and taxpayer money is involved to clear the contamination, I feel in the past we've been shortchanged, because on those sites, then we should insist that there must be either 20% or 50% or 25% should be council houses. Can I have a pledge here today? You will fight for that, sir.
Thank you. So we have two separate issues here. Often there is a requirement from a council that we're going to bring land to development needs to be decontaminated. That's the first phase. The second phase then is actually what happens in situ, and local authorities are the planning authorities. So the way through this is for this place to work with local authorities in a more strategic way on the development of those sites. What I would also say is that I think we need to be more sophisticated than rather just putting money into sites on the basis like it's a grant. We should be looking, if there is some future upside from development, of taking a stake in that and using our stake to shape future housing solutions. So everything will be driven by a business case. That business case supports our intervention from the Combined Authority. And I'd be very happy and I'd be keen to work with councils in terms of what happens post-development and post-planning to ensure that we're maximising the Section 106 benefits and or the housing benefits from those developments.
Thank you. If I could move on to the last question on warm and properly insulated clothes.
So we're back to question 18. So Dudley has worked in collaboration with the Combined Authority on a net zero project within the borough. And it's a pilot, so it will demonstrate, and it's a combination of private and council properties. So it will be a good example of demonstration on how it unlocking funds and getting resident buy-in to proposals. But we do know that in order to get towards reaching our net zero target, that homes must be better insulated. Both warm in the summer and warm in the winter even, and cool in the summer. So we also know it's incredibly costly to do this. Councils and private ownership need funding and need grant availability to be able to do this in their own properties at pace. So what will your role be in terms of unlocking any finance, be it through government, be it through the private sector, to enable those, to enable people within the region to apply for those very important grants?
Thank you, Kathy. I'll refer, and just after I said a few words, to Ed Cox left to me on some of the ongoing conversation with governments about future schemes and announcements we might get from government. My understanding is that the government have recommitted to devolving some more budgets around pilots from April next year, which we must take up and use those to help shape, and this is, I think, the issue, help shape future policy and interventions, which is important. We'll ask Ed to say a bit more about that. But one of the issues we have is about working with really clarity at scale and giving some certainty to homeowners or renters and the private sector about what's required, and also the technical approach to this about how different interventions impact certain archetypes. And indeed, across large parts of this region, we've already talked about the quality of housing. In some cases, it might mean that we need new housing rather than simply retrofitting what we've got, because much of the housing across this region is already well beyond its useful life. So some big decision, which I hope will be informed by the pilot work. Scale in terms of addressing these issues is really important. And one of the benefits we get is a group of mayors working together with similar agendas, is that we also talk about how we can share best practice and work at scale to create a proposition to the market that was hopefully a greater interest than if we worked on our own. So at the government's International Investment Summit last Monday, Angela Rayner chaired a meeting in the afternoon with investors, and we were discussing projects like this and others. And as a group of mayors, as we work through some pilot work, we are really interested in taking at least one proposition to the market based on, if you like, of collaborating and leveraging up the size and scale of the proposition. So I'm hoping, and this was one of the areas mentioned, I'm hoping that with further development work on the pilots, and that taking place also in other Mayoral Combined Authority, but I might have some clarity about the types of programme that we might need. So it's not just the programmes and getting more certainty how that might work. I'll ask Ed to talk about, but there's also something else which is really important to me, is that once we've got something around some certainty around scale and volume, it's so important that the jobs and the new jobs we're creating to do that work, are framed around the needs and skills of people in this region too. It would be a travesty if we created pipelines of £20 billion worth of work, and that work wasn't going to businesses in this region, and it wasn't benefiting the workforce in this region. But I'll ask Ed to say a bit more about the ongoing conversation with government about the future pilot programme.
Thank you. So as the mayor's outlined, the problem we've got at the moment is that so many of the retrofit programmes are very short term and piecemeal. They're very often targeted on particular types and tenures of homes, and they come through competitive bidding processes. So we're all against each other in trying to land the funding in our particular local authority areas. The main problem with that is that gives no certainty to the market whatsoever. So it's very difficult to develop those supply chains, to build confidence, and then to get the skills benefits that the mayor was just talking about. So what we've been negotiating with government is just for the West Midlands and for Greater Manchester, as part of the integrated settlement deal that we struck through the Trailblazer devolution deal, we will now move towards what they're calling a buildings retrofit pilot in the West Midlands. What that means is that all of these piecemeal funds will be packaged up into a single fund, which will then provide a whole range of benefits in doing it in that way. For a start, it will mean that we get a longer term funding programme. We will get far more flexibility over the way in which we want to deploy that fund. So we'll be able to choose what kind of tenure types, what kind of houses would be best for our different local authority areas. We'll be able to then work with our local authorities, and plans are already in place to do this, whereby each local authority can bring forward its own pipeline of where it sees which houses need to be retrofitted at what speed and in what order. So we'll get that pipeline sorted out, and then that will mean that we can give much greater confidence to the market to actually bring forward the products that might need to be brought forward, the finance packages, and indeed the supply chains, the actual products themselves, and the way in which they're going to be delivered, whether that's on a street by street or neighbourhood by neighbourhood basis. So we're currently in negotiation about what the detail of that package is going to look like, but it will be part of the new Warm Homes plan that was announced just a few weeks ago, and it should be in place starting in April next year.
I think we've got 17 minutes left. I think we have to move on to employment and skills. If we have any spare time at the end, we can do. We'll come back to any other issue. There are two big questions in here, or two themes anyway. I'd like to start with Councillor Bateman on the childcare one. Please, for that.
Yeah, no, Parker, this has been framed by my deputy, so I've got to give you the same enthusiasm she would be giving you.
You are.
The job, the availability of free childcare places is a key determinant for some people's ability to take up employment opportunities. What role could the Mayor have in helping scale up the availability of free childcare places in order to meet the demand?
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. So I understand, I think we all understand what impact childcare has on many young families that want to go to work, not just in terms of the cost, but their availability. Now, I don't have a massive amount of direct influence over the availability of childcare, but through our post-19 skills and training programmes, we are developing programmes that will and support the access to skills that allow young people, particularly, to access new skills in childcare. So we are using part of our adult education budget through boot camps and other training courses to support or to increase the supply in childcare. But I'm also doing something else which is equally important, is that we are investing in skills of the future that help those young people with families get access to skills that will improve their job prospects and help them build careers in this region. So it's a two-sided approach in terms of the powers that we have, which are quite limited, is how do we support and invest in a skill system that allows people to get access to the skills to take up their roles in the childcare sector. And then aligned to that is helping those young people with families access the skills they need that will allow them to develop their careers and ultimately get better paid jobs.
Just a quick supplementary. I understand what you've said about the direct impact of your role, but there's also the impact of the Mayor putting his shoulder behind the issue itself. And I would like to be able to go back to Jazima and say to the Mayor recognises that it's not a full role and full impact that he's got in the role that he's got, but he's quite happy to support the authorities in their pressure to make sure that they get enough childcare places that allows parents and the like to expand themselves and get jobs and skills.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Yes, I can assure you the shoulder is where it needs to be or where you want it to be. I've campaigned with politicians across this region, including MPs, around breakfast clubs for our young people, which are really important. And I would encourage you and councillors from across the region to keep me informed on where you are on the status of childcare places and how many young families are enabled to secure places that they need so they can go to work and fulfil their other ambitions. So I would encourage you to share information data you've got with me, and I will commit to campaigning for you and with you to ensure this region gets the childcare places it needs.
Thank you. If I could move now to Councillor Fenton on the skills mapping question, because I think that's the
Thank you. You touched on it as well then, Celeste. The question I've got is, how are you mapping out what skills we need for the future? And to tie into that, how are you ensuring that we don't end up with too many people that have one set of skills and not enough people with a different set of skills that may be needed?
Councillor Fenton, interesting you say that. We don't have enough people with any skills at the moment. So and that is genuinely the case. So it's a really important point. I've said before about this region's economic performance has been woeful. The skills gap is really disturbing. The number of young people out of work is a real concern, if not tragic. And against our greatest regional competitor, Greater Manchester, the region most like us in terms of its industrial heritage, its history, its demography, we are now almost 15% behind it in terms of economic productivity and competitiveness, which in itself needs to be addressed, because if it doesn't, this region we're going backwards, not forwards. And at the heart of the issue that we need to address is around the fault lines in the skill system, and the absence of skills is blighting the lives of too many people in this region, and it's hindering our economic progress. What is really important is that we have a skills system that is absolutely aligned to the skills that businesses need in this region, and that is not happening today. So the team here are working with academics and others to address statistics and data to understand the trends around business needs and what's required. That's really, really important, and that helps shape our view of the future. The strategic overlay of that is the regional growth plan we need to develop and submit to the Chancellor Exchequer, and that needs to do two things. It needs to identify those industries of the future that are going to help us grow our economy and attract those high-paid jobs and skills that are going to help us bridge that productivity gap and improve our competitiveness. And that's really important. But I'm really clear to the team here, as every leader in the region has been, is that we want that plan for those great new jobs, whether it's in digital or advanced engineering or life sciences or green tech, to be underpinned by the recognition of the importance of construction, engineering, logistics to ordinary people in this region. So we've got two things to do. Invest in those industries that are going to attract those jobs, but also ensuring that the jobs that we need in this region that are likely to be accessible to many of those young people are given a really key role. And if we do that, we can make the progress we need. And stakeholders, businesses, experts in government, using data available from the Office of National Statistics and others are helping us shape and plan that skills system of the future. I've also been really clear to Ed and others in the Combined Authority here that I want our growth plan underpinned by a set of actions and interventions we need to make to move our economy from where it is today to where it needs to be. And at the heart of that is mapping out a skills system, that is relevant to this region. And why is that important? I don't want a growth plan that if you tore the title off the front, West Midlands, you wouldn't know what place it was about. So it needs to be embedded in this region. And I don't want it to be a growth plan that doesn't have relevance or resonance to the majority of the people in this region. So it needs to be relevant. And the way of making it relevant is ensuring we're investing in a skills system that meets the needs of this region and meets the needs of businesses that are here now and here in the future. And that mapping exercise is taking place at this very moment. And out of that, I think will be one really key imperative for us, not just for me or council leaders, but businesses in this region, that we need a greater say in the skills system, particularly post-16. So we ensure that colleges across this region are training young people, particularly young people, in the skills that will get them better paid jobs, but also the skills that businesses in this region need.
Thank you. We've got 10 minutes left, 9 minutes left, which includes closing remarks from the mayor. Councillor Waters, have you got a quick one?
Yes, just a quick one. Along the lines of apprenticeships. Now, we've got children, well, young adults, that if you sit them in a classroom, the brain is just going to go blank. But you put them into a working environment and give them a job to do, they'll be able to do it. So that's something we need to be working on, is understanding all the skills and qualifications written down mean nothing to those children. They can actually do hands-on work, and this is something we need to be focused on. Thank you, Chair.
I'll answer that very quickly. I couldn't agree with you all, Councillor Waters. My objective is to do as very much as I can for those cohort of young people, and that's the biggest difference I can make to their lives. Yeah, and I'll say this, from the first cohort of young people going through our Path to Apprenticeship programme, most of them left school with little or no qualifications. Sadly, they're 19, not 16 now, but that first cohort of people have had some work experience, a guaranteed job interview, and the first cohort who've got apprenticeships, and it's changing their lives. And it's, to be honest, some of the staff here, when we did some media after that programme, and it's a programme that Liz Kendall visited just the other week, were saying to me that everyone needs a second chance. I've met those young people, they've not had a first chance. These programmes we're developing will make a difference to people's lives, give some skills that will get them well-paid jobs, and it meets the needs of our industry too.
Councillor Kay, do you wish to raise your question on IT?
Thank you. With the ever-increasing importance of technology, does the mayor have prioritized training in software design and development, including coding skills to create software?
Thank you very much, Councillor Kay. So we've already outlined some of the challenges we face in this region, and one of the great ways we can bridge that productivity gap, that gap on competitiveness, is investing in skills around technology and software development and design. There's no doubt about that. So we offer currently boot camps that help people, young and older people, acquire skills very, very quickly, which help them inform their CVs, given the practical experience they need to move across sectors or into better jobs, and particularly sectors where the jobs are. And I'd be really clear, previous announcements about an additional 1,000 or 2,000 jobs in tech or fintech or digital in this region are important to me, but what's more important is that people in this region living here, learning here, getting skills here, getting those jobs. That's really, really important. Our responsibility is to ensure that we're aligning investment in those training programs to help people get the skills they need to attract those jobs. And if we can do that, we can make this place a more attractive place to invest in. And just to give an example, on some of the digital boot camps that are being run currently, they're around cybersecurity, digital marketing, data science, and others. And we're making really good progress. And I'm informed that in the very high proportion of young people accessing those skills are now getting jobs in new sectors and helping them build new careers here.
Yes, thank you. I continue to be astonished not by the number of people using their smartphones, but how few of them know how the electronics work or would be able to write an app to run on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could just ask a quick, we could up the house building requirements by about 50% across the West Midlands. We were short of building labour to start with. Are you going to be able to upskill the workforce rapidly enough to deliver the number of additional homes that are planned?
So I would like every home built in this region to be built by people, by labour, by people with the skills that they've acquired in this region. So there's absolutely clarity on that. And I think the house building targets prevent a fantastic opportunity for us to invest in and develop the skills that our people need to get really well paid work. There are some real fault lines in our skills system currently, and that is we're not running enough courses that industry needs. But sadly, and I took a team that visited from number 10, not politicians, but a team in number 10 to Wolverhampton a few weeks ago to look at opportunities for young people and some youth hubs. And we went to the city of Wolverhampton College, where there's enormous appetite from young people in the Black Country to acquire skills in the construction industry. But sadly, many colleges can't even retain or recruit staff currently to teach those courses because of the shortage in the industry itself. So the approach we're taking has to be holistic and it needs to be comprehensive. And the discussions we're having around investing in the skills for the future and the skills that our businesses and sectors need are at the top of my agenda. And that's why when I talked about our growth plan for the region, and whilst those bits about this new economy we want to build are really important, it will be underpinned by the recognition of those skills in construction engineering that are fabric and need to be a foundation for rebuilding our economy, creating the homes that this region needs.
Thank you, Dave. From my own personal experience, there are not many plumbers, electricians, plasterers, brickies who can work to the age of 67. Your back goes. I think we probably need a concerted approach at getting some of those, should we say, more mature building workers into our colleges to do the practical stuff. I don't know how much of a role that the combined authority can play in just a new approach and trying to actually get older people to do the training as a new career, but using the skills of their old career. To actually make a step change. Otherwise, I don't think we'll ever do it.
And that's a good point. I think we need to look at every option available to us to upskill that workforce as quickly as possible.
I think you have time for one more question, which I'd like to come to you.
Thank you very much. My question actually ties across a couple of our different areas. And you had some very encouraging things to say, both about what we're doing locally and as far as skills and jobs and mapping. My question is more about your, I guess you would say, backroom way of implementation. One thing that local government, regional government, and to be honest, Westminster as well, are notorious for doing poorly is silo working. So even in the way that we have structured our questions today, we have grouped them into different areas. You mentioned the word holistic shortly. I'm a big fan of co-production, of policy, and of delivery. And I would like to know if you have anybody who has in your team a responsibility for that sort of co-production, working across teams, so that when you have perhaps a retrofit plan that sounds very, very exciting about how you're going to do it, are they also talking to your skills people to make sure that local SMEs are prioritized over some of those national firms so that we can make sure we get degree apprenticeships for our local skilled workers instead of having all of those skills and profits taken out of the region? How are we connecting those two in the back room?
I'll be brief because I'm running out of time and have got a very finished note. So one of the things the chief executive is leading on here will be a redesign of the way this organisation works. And I think in recognition of what you've said, but also the scale of the problem we've got here, one of the issues we need to address is joining up our agendas and aligning them. So we use every pound of resource to best effect. And when we are investing in our transport system, our skills network, or new technologies, that we're ensuring that everyone benefits and we're developing a workforce with those skills. So the plan going forward is to have something here that's far more cohesive, far more joined up, and allowing us to get maximum benefit from every pound we spend, whether that's in skills, in housing, in infrastructure or technology.
Thank you, Richard. I'd like to thank you for coming today. Have you got any last comments you'd like to make before you depart to your meeting?
No, I'd just like to thank you for your time and the questions. We covered a lot of ground. I found it very informative myself. I hope the answer provided at least a response to you on where we are now and the plans ahead. And I look forward to working in the future, but also discussing ways in which Scrutiny can play a more proactive role, particularly around policy development and the development of new approaches as we move forward.
Thank you.
Councillors and officers.
Bye, everybody.